Not all who wander are lost. J.R.R. Tolkien. Welcome to a very special episode of Montreal Street Signs. So far, we've been celebrating streets with dozens of fantastic stories. But I don't have to tell you that every street in this great town has at least one tall tale worth telling. So how about in this, our final episode, we get to as many as we possibly can, but remember, this isn't a race. By the way, you may already have noticed there's a little bit of magic we've introduced into today's episode. And for you word geeks, the science of street naming is called toponymics. And today, we're going to discuss the origins of as many streets as we possibly can from A to Z. Follow me. Now, to help you get, acclimated and comfortable with the magic stuff, let me point out right away that we have a little bit of something for you right here. I'm sorry, right here. Yeah, okay. And it's Armstrong Avenue. Named for the first person to walk on the moon, American astronaut Neil Armstrong. It's a few blocks from Buzz Aldrin Avenue, named for the second person to walk on the moon. That same day, in 1969. Next. Dr. Fred Banting is the Canadian physician who discovered insulin in 1921, earning him the Nobel Prize. It's estimated his discovery has saved close to 17 million lives. This building on Beaver Hall Hill, built with steel frame in 1929, was once the international head office of the Bell Telephone Company. And by the way, in case you didn't know, Bell is the #1 employer in Montreal. 12,000 employees. You know, you can learn a lot of history even from the graffiti you read on these things. Well, let's just take a look right there. Jack the Ripper loves bagels. Okay, this has got to be a really old badge. I mean, really, that's something. And this here, get off, only seats one. George Burling, winner of the Distinguished Flying Cross, is recognized as Canada's most famous hero of the Second World War. Buzz Burling was a fighter pilot without peer, once shooting down 27 enemy aircraft in 14 days. Actor Robert De Niro calls Montreal a great city. And actress Renee Zellweger loves this town because her parents were married on St. Catherine Street. Bono of the band U2 says, "Our city has the most beautiful women he's ever seen." And former Soviet President Mikhail Gorbachev calls Montreal the pearl of the world. You know, there's a legend in this town that if you sit on a bench long enough, a pretty girl's going to sit down beside you. Got a minute? Now, when it comes to our great cinematic houses, the architectural gem of Montreal is the Imperial on Blurry Street. Calixa-Lavallée Avenue is named after the man who composed the music for O Canada. The provinces of Alberta and Manitoba have adapted Latin phrases from the English lyrics as their mottos. Also, the Canadian Army's motto is the familiar, "Always stand on guard for thee." Oh, come on. Clark Street was named after one of Montreal's largest property owners in 1864. Today, the street changes direction 6 times and gets sectioned 4 times, a city record. My grandmother had an apartment here in the 1960s. I can still taste her chicken soup. By the way, Grandma said Halloween was a big deal in this neighborhood. She said trick-or-treating began in Ireland in the 1800s and only grew popular here in the 1920s. Like always, my wife and I will be wearing our Batman and very sexy Batwoman costumes for Halloween, though this year I might let her be Batwoman. Men outnumbered women almost 2 to 1 for the first 50 years of Montreal's existence. Immigration fluctuated as soldiers and politicians had a habit of moving back to France. The women who came to Montreal, however, came to stay. And today, females hold a slight majority. Côte Saint-Antoine is the oldest street on the island. It was used by the native Amerindians for thousands of years to bypass the mountain. Did you know the need for actual roads was only introduced when Europeans arrived with their horse-drawn carriages? Yeah, I had no clue either. Christophe Colomb Avenue was named after the explorer in 1897. Montreal has over 350 parks, and this street features a good number of them. And those parks are filled with statues, including a monument to Queen Isabella of Spain in Sir Wilfrid Laurier Park. She inherited the throne from her warmongering brother, but used her newfound power for peace. In 1476, when a local rebellion broke out, and going against the advice of her male advisors, Isabella rode by herself into the city to negotiate with the rebels. She was successful, and the rebellion was quickly brought to an end. The stuff that statues are made of. So a lot of people don't know Bat Masterton was born just outside of Montreal. He used to drink on De La Commune.
Excuse me? Can you direct me to St. Lawrence Boulevard?
That would be episode 4. And St. Lawrence, well, this is one gift that keeps on giving. Fans. Our underground city has more than 30 kilometers of pedestrian walkways linking 10 metro stations, 2 railway stations, 2 bus stations, 62 buildings, 7 major hotels, 1,600 apartments, 200 restaurants, 1,700 boutiques, 37 movie theaters and exhibition halls, 2 universities, 1 college, and over 10,000 indoor parking spaces. Now, I'd like to be able to tell you that makes Montreal's underground city larger than 99% of the other cities in Canada. But you know what? I didn't look it up, so I actually don't have the answer for you. DeCarry Boulevard runs across the former DeCarry family farm, famous for developing the Montreal melon, a fruit with an Agatha Christie-like mystery attached to it. You see, an ancient strain of the melon was first grown by the Jesuits in the 1690s, and by the 1880s, it was recognized as the best-tasting melon in North America, a slice of which was selling in Boston hotels for more than the price of a piece of steak. But by the 1920s, mysteriously, the melon vanished. The prized Montreal fruit had disappeared into legend. The reason? Automobiles. That's correct. Investigations established the secret ingredient that gave the melon its famous flavor was, wait for it, horse manure. More cars meant fewer horses, but don't fret. Seeds were recently rediscovered in the U.S. Department of Agriculture Seed Bank, and the Montreal melon is being reintroduced. And how's it being fertilized? How would I know? Come on, you gotta love this. We're standing at the corner of DeSalle and DeSalle. Now, before your brain explodes, one is a street, the other is a place. What? Tommy Douglas was a Canadian Social Democratic politician. Douglas was the leader of the Saskatchewan Cooperative Commonwealth Federation in 1942 and the 7th Premier of Saskatchewan from 1944 to 1961. And oh yes, he introduced universal public Medicare in 1961. Yeah, Hey. Yeah, guy looked a lot like me. Einstein Avenue is named for the Nobel Prize-winning physicist Albert Einstein. If you don't recognize the name, you might remember the catchy tune. E equals MC squared. Oh, taxi! I'm sorry, I'm in a hurry and I've got to go. Called rustic until 1969, Freud Avenue was named for Dr. Sigmund Freud, who was the first to realize mental disorders could be caused by psychological factors instead of organic brain disease. Gouin Boulevard is Montreal's longest street at over 50 kilometers. I don't suppose anyone can tell me the longest motoring road in the world. You in front? No, him, the guy in the propeller hat and pajama bottoms. Yeah, the one with the propeller hat on his head. Correct. No. It's the Pan American Highway, 29,800 miles long from Alaska to Argentina. You know, buildings in Montreal remained wooden until the year 1664, when Louis XIV declared the colony a French province. This led to the introduction of king's engineers and a shift to stone buildings. This lack of artistic expression to demonstrate wealth caused many of the well-to-do to simply build larger buildings. This caused a boom in the demand for stone and why there is nothing left of the wooden structures that originally populated the city. Ilan Ramon Crescent was named after the first Israeli astronaut. Ramon and 6 fellow astronauts died on February the 1st, 2003, when the Space Shuttle Columbia re-entered the atmosphere of the Earth. According to the city toponomic site, Jarry Street and Jarry Park are named for different people. The street is named after an early 18th century landowner, but the park is named in honor of a one-time city councilor. The first Major League Baseball home game ever played in Canada was here at Jarry Park. Today, the street has another universal distinction. It's home to the headquarters of the Cirque du Soleil. The Jean Talon train station was named the most beautiful in Montreal. By the way, I have it on good authority that Jean Talon Boulevard had a long history of mobsters collecting protection money along its route. Just saying. Perhaps that's why it has almost a witness protection obsession with name changes. Before going with Jean Talon in 1922, the boulevard was called Hopper, Tiffin, Bag, and even Baby Street. I'm just asking to hold the bus. 1 minute, just 1 second. I'll be right with you. In 1679, Montreal land baron René Robert LaSalle commissioned the Griffin, the first ship to ever sail the Great Lakes. LaSalle Boulevard honors his memory. Though it no longer serves as one, you're looking at what's considered Montreal's most beautiful fire station on Le Tournou Avenue in the East End. Sorry, what's that? Lantern, Avenue in the East End. Better? Osborne House was Queen Victoria's favorite residence on the Isle of Wight in Britain. It is a remarkable structure with all the fixings available in 1845 England, including the Queen's bathing machine. Yeah, listen to this. An engineering marvel rolled into the salty sea for her bathing pleasure. Louis Pasteur is the French scientist who's credited with proving germ theory, which revolutionized the practice of medicine. Applying his theories gave us pasteurization. No, it gave us pasteurization, which prevents milk from going sour. He also came up with a vaccine for rabies. Oh my, I think that's the biggest dog I've ever seen. Does he bite? Ooh. Boy, I wonder what the pet would have sounded like. There's a windmill in Pointe-aux-Trembles at the corner of 3rd Avenue and Notre Dame Street, built in 1719. Its 3 stories make it the tallest windmill in Quebec. Completed in 1914, the Maisonneuve Market on Ontario Street is considered the most remarkable of its kind in the city. Papineau Street is the longest north-south street in Montreal at 10.5 kilometers. It's named after Joseph Papineau, politician and father of Louis-Joseph Papineau, the leader of the Patriote movement of 1837. P9 Boulevard is named after Pope Pius IX, who passed away in 1878. He was the longest reigning elected pope in the history of the Catholic Church, over 31 years. It was on his watch in 1870 when nationalist armies incorporated the papal state into the Kingdom of Italy. After that, he referred to himself as the prisoner of the Vatican. Montreal is plane, boat, and train accessible. It has a Latin Quarter, Chinatown, gay village, and a vibrant city center with no off switch. It has 266 kilometers of shoreline, circling a mountain with a dozen miles of ski trails. It has an annual 10,000-person zombie walk, a fireworks competition with spectacular river views, and oh yeah, the biggest jazz and comedy festivals in the world. Montreal is fully committed to 4 seasons, building a lighted ice village in the old port every winter and releasing thousands of butterflies at botanical gardens every summer. It's referenced in tour guides as the continent's Sin City and the City of 1,000 church bells, both totally justified. This is the cultural capital for English Quebec and the second largest French-speaking city in the world. Montreal is even the tango capital of North America. If you can't find what you're looking for here, I think you're just too shy to ask. Listen to this. Fluent in both French and English, Frederick von Ribbentrop lived at various times in France and London before traveling to Canada in 1910, where he worked for the Molson's Bank on Stanley Street. Jump to World War II, when Ribbentrop became Hitler's favorite foreign policy advisor because of his familiarity with Western world, uncommon among Germans at the time. Arrested in 1945, he was tried at the Nuremberg trials and convicted of war crimes for his role in enabling the Holocaust. On October 16, 1946, he became the first of those sentenced to death to be hanged. Von Ribbentrop, former Stanley Street denizen, had the distinction of being, quote, the Nazi even the Nazis hated. The venerable St. James Street, now St. Jacques, reached its peak of influence in 1895 when no less than 3 national banks were headquartered there. Railway, public utility, and canal interests also lined the street, and its stock exchange was the most powerful in Canada. My people knew people who worked there. The Pointe Claire windmill at number 1 St. Joachim was built in 1709 and is the oldest windmill on the island of Montreal. Luckily, someone turned this one off. This is the junction where St. Antoine merges onto St. Jacques, and that bronze statue celebrates Louis Cyr. Now, why would anyone build a statue to a Montreal police officer? Because from 1880 until 1906, when he retired, Louis Cyr performed feats of strength unmatched to this day, making him the strongest man who ever lived. Of course, no one's tested me yet, and I can crush a walnut in a walnut crusher. Viau is named after the biscuit plant that stood on the corner of Ontario Street in 1867. That's right, a biscuit plant. And what goes better with a biscuit than a glass of milk? Built in 1926, the Elmhurst Dairy is also long gone. We're on Vielle Street in Bordeaux, in front of St. Joseph's Parish. When the teenaged Morris Rocket Richard wasn't attending services here, he was playing hockey around the corner for the Paquette junior team. He scored 133 of the team's 144 goals that season. The Rocket grew up so poor, the first NHL game he ever saw was the first one he played in as a member of the Montreal Canadiens. When the greatest hockey player who ever lived passed away, the Rockets' funeral was nationally broadcast, the first ever accorded a Canadian athlete. What's that? This here is Vigée Street, named after Jacques Vigée, Montreal's first mayor, selected by City Council in 1833. Other streets named after politicians include the 35th President of the United States, President Kennedy, Governor General Baron Geoffrey Amherst, and Secretary of State for Ireland in 1877, Lord Frederick Charles Cavendish. Hey, me hearties, Wellington Street is named for Arthur Wellesley, 1st Duke of Wellington and 2-time Prime Minister of the United Kingdom. He's best known for having defeated Napoleon in the Battle of Waterloo in June 1815. Yeah, this is just an idea. I'm putting it out there. Do what you want with it. But people get street names for a lot less. Donovan Street. Sound good? Not for no reason. Art. Look, I could go all over town. I could do this all day long. Name a street after me. As promised, we've made our way through the alphabet. Why? Because we're at Van Horn. Nobody ever asked me what my favorite street was. Van Horn, where I grew up, where I met my first best friend and read my first comic book. But I have one more street I want to talk to you about. Come with me. They say history remembers kings, not soldiers. Well, my dad was a soldier. Grew up on Delormier Street. At the age of 19, he enlisted with the celebrated Vendus, Quebec's Royal 22nd Regiment, and went to Korea. When I was old enough to hear it, he told me a story Montreal soldiers had been handing down for 200 years, and it's a good one. When the Americans came looking for Canada's surrender in 1812, you already know, we pushed them all the way back to Washington and famously burned down the White House. But here's something you just might not know. The Americans were being manhandled by a regiment from Montreal consisting of French, English, and Aboriginal soldiers. As they fought their way south, they came upon and freed a camp of captured African slaves. Fun fact, our ancestors asked the liberated men if they were interested in making a statement. And so it was, under the watchful eye of a regiment from Montreal, these newly freed slaves burned down the White House. If you don't believe me, you can go talk to the Royal 22nd Regiment. I often think of my dad's story when I get out into the city. You can see our historical pride in the way Montrealers walk, shoulders back, a happy, confident people. Maybe that's because at the end of the day, we remember where we came from. Not the religion or language or politics, but the common ground. We remember that we all grew up together on these very same Montreal streets. You know, I can't believe it, but we've reached the end of the road, dear people, and I miss you already. Look, if you're an out-of-towner planning on visiting Montreal, let's look out for each other, all right? You know me. I'll be around.
I love Cherrier Street.
My favorite street in Montreal is Bernard. I've just opened a store here and I feel so welcome.
My favorite street, Montreal.
I would say Saint Laurent because it's the most colorish street with all the murals and everything.
Well, my favorite street is probably St. Viator Street because I've been here for almost a decade.
Well, my favorite street is St. Catherine Street because I'm from Vancouver. So when I come to Montreal, I like to shop.